Right now, Stormy Daniels is facing redirect after Trump's attorneys hammered the sex film worker on the nature of her actual relationship between Daniels and Trump. However, as the former president walked in this morning, he took the time to warn America about the far left. Watch this.
Your problem is from the left, it's not from the right. Big problem from the left. It's from within our country. That's a bigger, in my opinion, a bigger danger than China or Russia. You have it from the outside and you have it from within. From within is a bigger danger to our country, and it's from the left, not from the right.
You know, Kaylee, this is a reminder of the fact that on day 14 of this trial, we haven't seen him much on the campaign trail. So this is keeping him sequestered in that courtroom. However, he does have a microphone and he does know how to use it. And he got political there.
He doesn't. And people are listening. And to his point, you know, the far left in China shared the exact same goal. And you saw this on college campuses across the country the past couple of weeks, where you had young adults screaming Intifada, revolution, down with capitalism, death to America. The shared goal is ultimately the destruction of America, its institutions, and the values that we all here cherish. And the bigger threat is the far left in this situation, because who controls the institutions? Who has the power in this country? The left. And we see this in a courtroom right now where the former president is facing hundreds of charges on multiple different indictments simply because Democrats are able to bring cases against him in these positions of power. And all China has to do at this point is push a few dominoes down and the house of cards crumbles within on itself. And so I think that's what he's pointing out, is that we have to remain unified and strong within, and we can't do that when one side of the country is determined to bring the whole thing crashing down.
So, Kevin, you know, it's complicated because there are a lot of divides across the spectrum of both houses. You know, the House, the Senate, Democrats, Republicans. But the divide between the far left right now is driving such a narrative that it's dangerous to the country. It is dangerous to hunt Jews. If we learned nothing in their past, it should be that. It's dangerous for all of us. It destroys us as a society. We're better than that. Yet that's what we're watching pour out on campuses and even in some of the streets of America now. And now the president says he wants to withhold the weaponry for our greatest ally in the Middle East. I mean, the far left, are they the people in your party that are dragging him, or is he going willingly?
Listen, there's a lot to unpack in what you said, Harris. The extremes in our politics are so dangerous on both sides, and I'm not doing a both sidesism about this. You know, what the former president just said in his rhetoric: China is the real enemy, Russia is the real enemy. China is slaughtering us by the tens of thousands every year with fentanyl coming across the border. Russia is slaughtering women and children in hospitals right at this very moment in Ukraine.
Well, he recognizes that. He talks about it. Biden doesn't.
But to ascribe political parties and reactionary parties in this country to that, I think, is fundamentally
So you don't
dangerous.
think the far left in your party don't court some of what's going on in the streets? Ilhan Omar's own daughter was caught up in that and
Absolutely.
arrested.
I fundamentally reject, you know, I'm a Democrat. I hate what I see out of the far left. I'm not a squad member. I hate the rhetoric.
So again, I ask my question, is he going there willingly, or are they dragging him?
I think what the president has said about this weapons package is something that, you know, we saw President Reagan do with F-16s in Israel in the past, with their war in Lebanon in 1983, withholding support. George H.W. Bush did the same thing a decade later. This is a tool that presidents often use to affect foreign policy with regards to Israel.
But they impeached Trump for it.
They impeached Trump because Trump tried to get, you know, a foreign government to release bad stuff about a political opponent.
Well, the allegation was that he was interfering with the election. But isn't that the exact same thing? Biden is deliberately changing his policy towards Israel to win votes.
Right.
Again, I don't think that's the case. I think he's trying to push for a ceasefire and a swift end to what we're seeing.
You know what's wrong with that?
So many
it's so short-sighted.
Innocent people losing their lives.
We had a ceasefire on October 6th.
We did.
Hamas broke it. Why would you go back to the same thing you had when you know days after that their PR leader, because yes, they do have one, he lives in Qatar, was making statements about doing it again and again and again and again. He could give you new dates. So not exactly the same thing.
I mean,
so you're talking about a phone call, and I'm talking about real people dying.
Yeah, Hamas is the real enemy.
We've kind of gone afield here, but the point is that the president still gets us to talk about what's important, even though he's not on the campaign trail. Emily.
Adding into this, I will just say, on top of the pot, will be the success of the massive social agitation and the porous southern border, the advocacy for rights that are destroying biological women in sports. Let's talk about the campuses that are being destructed. There is an entire chaos element that is a stated objective of our enemies like Russia and China and the communist regimes all over the place, that what they want to see is America implode from within. That is exactly what's happening, and it is the Democrats. I'm not politicizing the issues, but I am pointing out and identifying who is leaving the door open, who is leaving the windows open, who has left everything threadbare and open for our enemies to pounce, including intellectual property theft and the physical security and the deaths of Americans. The list goes on, but it is all at the welcome mat at the front door by the Democrats and those progressive libs.
Yeah. The far left, in particular, is what I was saying. But the Democrat Party, as Emily put it, wears it.
Well, listen,
I would just say follow the money. That with the college campus protest, I and many of my colleagues at Fox Business started to follow the money. Where is this coming from? And it is very hard to track, but the more we dug into it, the more answers that we did not have. Because is this money coming from overseas groups? We know that many of those college protesters were not members of those schools. We know that they had been trained for months by outside groups. That's one issue. As far as going back to President Biden, what you initially brought up, and the fact that he is now, taking this deal and taking these munitions away from the Israelis, I think it is political in the fact that he needs those, again, from a numbers perspective, he needs those younger voters to come out in November. And those are the ones that are most angry at him because of his policies towards the Israelis and the Palestinians and the war that's happening. And so I do believe that was a political move to try and pull back a little bit, even if those in the Pentagon were warning him against that.
So your great work that you guys are doing at Fox Business, we've talked about on the couch and on the Faulkner Focus. David Rockefeller Jr. for the Rockefeller brothers and George Soros and his son Alexander Soros and some of the money flowing from there. There are a couple of others that are really big donors to Joe Biden.
Pritzker.
Pritzker, that's another one. His Illinois governor's cousin, Nick, and his wife, Susan, money going to some of this protesting and things.
And it may be backfiring. That money that is being funneled through these groups, to your point, they're not doing it directly. They're not, Rockefeller's not writing a direct check.
That's why it's hard to
funding
trace.
These groups. That's why we had to work on tracing the money. Yeah. But when you start to uncover where the money is going, because they don't have to file tax returns, those groups, you find out that what's happening now, this is going to backfire on them, because I think it's backfiring on Joe Biden. Yeah. And if those younger voters just don't show up in November, that backfires on Joe Biden.
Real quickly, should he give that money back to those people who gave it to them if you can't trace it?
Absolutely.
Okay. Nice. You should call him. He knows you really well. You were a surrogate.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McGhee on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.